Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa amma ba'd. Let me get my notes out. Okay, so we were doing let's see what we were doing 2 weeks ago. Okay, so we were basically looking at the different types of hadith, tadbij and sabiq wal lahiq and man haddasa wa
Great.
nasiya. Now we come on to a special type of hadith which is called al-musalsal, which literally means the continuous. وَإِنِ
Mhm.
اتَّفَقَ الرُّوَاةُ again is a feature of the isnad. That's why they're mentioning it here. That is a feature of the isnad. It says وَإِنِ اتَّفَقَ الرُّوَاةُ في إسناد من الأسانيد في صيغ الأداء. That if all of the narrators are unanimous on some features of the isnad, such as the way that they have transmitted it في صيغ الأداء. uh, um, for example, they say كسمعت فلانا قال سمعت فلانا, or they say حدثنا فلان قال حدثنا فلان وغير ذلك من السياق أو غيرها من الحالات القولية. Or so if they basically all of them use the same terminologies. For example, let's say every single one of them is using the terminology أنبأنا. Yeah, so
Mhm.
you'll say المسلسل بالإنباء, right? Or everybody's using سمعت, so it's المسلسل بالسماع. Or
Mhm.
they are doing something أو غيرها من الحالات القولية, or some other kind of features, verbal features, like they say سمعت فلانا يقول أشهد بالله لقد حدثني فلان إلى آخره. The everybody's saying I heard the following person say, or I heard someone say, Ashhadu billahi, I bear a witness to Allah that this following person has done riwayat to me. So, for example, every single one of them, before they narrate, they say, I swear by Allah, uqsimu billahi, and then they start, right? Or awil fa'aliyya, or they do something physically. For example, somebody says دخلنا على فلان فأطعمنا تمرا إلى آخره, that we went to visit this so and so person and they gave us dates. So you'll get hadiths like this where a companion came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke to him, gave him aswadain, which is zamzam and tamar, right? Now, this Sahabi, when he went to teach this hadith to his students, he will start by giving them aswadain. And then the student will then give their students aswadain, and that kind of tradition passed on. That
Mhm.
brings those kind of features bring a kind of beauty to the isnad, but also some kind of authenticity. It becomes like a gimmick, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, or أو القولية والفعلية معا, so verbal and action together. كقوله حدثني فلان وهو آخذ بلحيته قال آمنت بالقدر إلى آخره. The following person, he narrated the hadith whilst he was holding his beard, and he said, I believe in taqdeer, and everybody is doing the same action, right?
Mm.
آخذ بلحيتي and saying آمنت بالقدر إلى آخره. This is called musalsal. Yeah. The
Yeah.
most the most authentic musalsal is al-musalsal bi surat al-saf, which is the everybody in the isnad, before they mention the hadith, and this is in the Tirmidhi, before they mention the hadith, they read Surah Al-Saf. سبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لم تقولون ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص. So the whole surah of Surah Al-Saf, this is called Al-Musalsal بسورة الصف. You will get Al-Musalsal بالسلام. You will get Al-Musalsal بالأسودين. You will get Al-Musalsal بآخذ اللحية. But the most famous of the musalsalat is, do you know what the most famous one is?
Is it the الأولوية?
Yeah, al-musalsal bil awwaliya, not
No.
awlawiya, awwaliya,
أولية. Yep, yep.
awwaliya. And it's the hadith recorded by Imam Tirmidhi, which says, Ar-Rahimun, yarhamuhumur Rahman, irhamu man fil ard, yarhamukum man fis sama. So this hadith is primarily most of the isnad. Uh, um, is musalsal. There is a gap, there is a breakage between Abu Qabus and Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Other than that, from the Prophet to the Sahabi onwards, there is tasalsul, and also after Sufyan there is tasalsul, but there is a gap in the isnad. So it's not what is the most famous one. Yeah. uh,
Interesting. Yeah.
وهو من صفات الإسناد. وقد يقع التسلسل في معظم الإسناد أو في معظم الإسناد. And the for something to be musalsal, it doesn't necessarily have to be all the way through. It needs to be in the majority part of the إسناد. كحديث المسلسل بالأولية فإن السلسلة أو سلسلة تنتهي فيه إلى سفيان بن عيينة. That the silsila, the continuity ends with Sufyan ibn Uyayna, but there is a break between him and Abu Qabus فقط. ومن رواه مسلسلا إلى منتهاه فقد وهم. And whoever has narrated this hadith all the way up to the Prophet Sallallahu tasalsulan without an inqita, then they have made a mistake. Yeah.
Hmm.
You had a comment or you had something to say?
No, no, no. Well, I mean, the only question I had basically is when did this musalsal style begin? Because obviously it came later on. How did it kind of begin?
I
Because
mean,
there's a lot of them.
yeah, I mean, people just recognize this. I mean, they innocuously happen, right? You know, if a person, the Prophet ﷺ gave somebody a date, and that person, Prophet ﷺ giving somebody a date, right? That person will cherish it, and then as a pious memory, when the that Sahabi then goes and teaches a student, maybe he gets overwhelmed with this emotion of the Prophet ﷺ and says, "Wait, let me just give you a date because the Prophet gave me a date," and then the tabi'i now then carries on with this tradition because it was so this is how innocuously it happens. Yeah.
Got it.
This is from Imam Abu Tahir as-Silafi uh, in his book Mashikhatul Baghdadiyya. He's giving his tasalsul of al-musalsal bil awwaliyya. He says akhbarana Muhammad ibn Sarraj. So I just want to kind of demonstrate to you how the tasalsul looks like. He says وهو أول حديث سمعته منه
Hmm.
قال حدثني أبو نصر عبيد الله بن سعيد بن حاتم السجزي الحافظ بمكة وهو أول حديث سمعته منه قال أخبرنا أبو يعلى حمزة بن عبد العزيز المهلبي وهو أول حديث سمعته منه قال أخبرنا أبو حامد أحمد بن محمد بن يحيى وهو أول حديث سمعته منه. So you can see that everybody is given the isnad, but they're
Right.
saying the first hadith. Yeah. قال أخبرنا عبد الرحمن بن بشر بن الحكم وهو أول حديث سمعته منه قال أخبرنا سفيان بن عيينة. سفيان بن عيينة وهو
Hmm.
أول حديث سمعته من سفيان بن عيينة عن عمرو بن دينار عن أبي قابوس مولى لعبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص. So there is انقطاع here, yeah,
Right.
between Amr ibn Dinar and Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Up to this
Right.
much, pretty much اتصال. مولى لعبد الله بن عمرو بن عاص عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن عاص أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. وقال لي this is Imam Abu Tahir al-Silafi saying وقال لي لما دخلت مصر حضرت مجلس أبي إسحاق الحبال فأخرج إلي هذا الحديث. So these are the kind of personal anecdotes that they're giving, right?
Hmm.
Abu Ishaq al-Habbal, he gave me this hadith. أخرج إلي هذا الحديث. He took out this hadith for me. He gave me this hadith. وكان يرويه أبي نصر فقلت وهو سماعي منه فقال اقرؤوه فتسمعه مني. I said, I've already heard this hadith from Abu Nasr. So he said, well, you read it also so that you can hear, you can also take it from me. وأسمعه منك, and I hear from you. فقرأه. So they read. So this is an example of tadbij. They read from each other.
Mm.
فقرأه قال السلفي هذا الحديث المسلسل سمعته من لفظه بقراءته علينا ولم أكن سمعت من لفظه شيئا قبله لكني كنت سمعت عليه قبل ذلك أشياء تقرأ عليه من فوائد السراج. أخبرنا أبو. So he's carrying on with this. It's different. Okay. Another hadith, which is basically musalsal, is a very beautiful one, and this is from my edition of the 40 hadith of Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani says, عن محمد ibn جحش قال حدثني العلامة الأوحد أبو طاهر محمد بن يعقوب الشيرازي اللغوي قاضي الأقضية بزبيد قال حدثني محمد بن محمد الأندلسي قال حدثنا محمد بن أحمد التلمساني قال حدثنا قاضي الجماعة أبو القاسم محمد بن أحمد بن محمد بن عبد الله الحسيني قال حدثنا محمد بن محمد بن الحدار قال حدثنا محمد بن يوسف الدمشقي قال حدثنا محمد بن أبي الحسين الصوفي قال حدثنا محمد بن عبد الله بن محمود الطائي قال حدثنا الحافظ أبو عبد الله محمد بن عبد الواحد الدقاق قال حدثنا محمد بن علي الكراتي الثرابي قال حدثنا الحافظ أبو عبد الله محمد بن إسحاق بن محمد بن يحيى العبدي قال حدثنا أبو منصور محمد بن سعد البارودي قال حدثنا محمد بن عبد الله الحضرمي قال حدثنا أبو بكر محمد بن عبد الله بن المثنى قال حدثنا محمد بن بشر قال حدثنا محمد بن عمرو قال حدثنا محمد بن سيرين عن أبي بكر مولى محمد بن جحش ويقال إن اسمه محمد أيضا عن محمد بن جحش عن محمد بن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه مر في السوق على رجل وفخذاه مكشوفتان فقال له غطي فخذيك فإن الفخذين عورة. أنبأنيه محمد بن محمد بن محمد بن أحمد بن مرزوق التلمساني قدم علينا حاجا عن جده محمد بن أحمد التلمساني. What is the تسلسل here?
Everybody's name is Muhammad.
It's a blessed isnad المسلسل بالمحمدية.
MashaAllah.
It's a blessed isnad.
MashaAllah.
Similarly, we've seen another blessed isnad previously, which is musalsal bil abna anil aba, but is al musalsal bi ahlil bayt. Yeah, this isnad that we saw
MashaAllah.
14. So these are blessed isnads. They've got specific features.
MashaAllah.
So this is Imam Ibn Hajar Asqalani. He says هذا حديث عجيب التسلسل بالمحمدين ومحمد بن يوسف المذكور فيه هو الحافظ زكي الدين البرزالي وقد رأيت هذا الحديث بخطه وأنبأني به عاليا محمد بن أحمد بن علي. So he's doing some kalam on this. So this is in the book that I wrote a commentary of. Do you have that book?
No, I don't.
Yes, so 40 hadith of, I don't have a copy to give you, but it's actually Turas who published it. You should get it 40
MashaAllah.
hadith. And
I'll check it out.
I've written a commentary on that book as well. So yeah. Okay, so this is, you understand, pretty much understand what tasalsul is, right? Or
Yes.
musalsal.
Yes.
And let me just see. This is by a kind of more recent 19th century scholar by the name of Sheikh Yasin Al-Fadani, who was a Indonesian scholar who was brought up in Mecca, and he was also known as the Muhaddith of Mecca. He wrote a book called Al-Ujala fi Ahadith al-Musalsala. So this book is all of his musalsalat, right?
MashaAllah.
And all of his isnads of the musalsalat. So he basically says, إن في زيارتي لمدينة بعد انتهاء الحرب العالمية الثانية أن تشرفت بزيارة الأخ الزميل العزيز المحب. No, this is somebody else writing this. بالفضل إبراهيم. No, no, no. So this is Sheikh Fadani saying that after World War II, I had the opportunity of visiting Medina بزيارة الأخ الزميل العزيز المحب المحدث المستاذ الشيخ أبو الفضل محمد إبراهيم بن ملا سعد القطني ثم المدني في منزلي بالساحة، واجتمعت فيه بأخوة أجلة من رواد الحديث والإسناد. So he called them رواد الحديث. رواد basically in modern Arabic is astronauts. So these are astronauts of hadith. I mean, he
Mm.
obviously he doesn't mean astronauts, but what do astronauts do? They go into space and they look for little minute dust and things like that, right? فطلب مني الزميل المذكور اسمعهم حديث الرحمة المسلسل بالأولية. So my friend, this Sheikh Abu al-Fadl Muhammad Ibrahim Mullah Sa'adullah, he basically said that he wants to listen to the مسلسل بالأولية from me. ثم أكد علي رغبة مصادقة لتلقي المسلسلات على شروطها، فقلت إلى غد حتى أفكر وأنزل الفرصة. So he said, well, you need to, according to the conditions, it's okay, I'll tell you tomorrow. وقبل أن يمضي يوم حضروا إلى منزلي بدار المكرم الشيخ أبي بكر عبد الله الجواد إمام باب الرحمة ومعهم شفيعهم الزميل. So before the end of the day, they came, all of these people, they came to me in my hotel or house with different nuskhas. And they وألحوا علي في الاستجابة لرغبتهم, and they basically kind of coerced me to read the musalsalat to them. فأجبت فأمليت عليهم هذه العجالة في الأحاديث المسلسلة. He basically said I dictated that's why he called it al-ujala. Ujala means something which is done in haste. مقتصرا على ما في مسلسلات ابن طيب. So because they had Ibn Tayyib's book with them, so he said I only can find with all of the hadiths in Ibn Tayyib's book. I appended my isnad to them. وتلقوها مني على شروطها مسلسلة بأعمالها القولية والفعلية. So they took all the musalsalat from me according to this condition, according to the conditions of verbal and also doing. So if there was a hadith that I was mentioning where in the hadith, the Prophet gave the Sahabi dates, then I also gave them dates. If the Prophet gave the Sahabi Zamzam, I also gave them Zamzam.
Mm.
If the hadith had the Prophet holding onto his beard, then I also held onto my beard. If the hadith said started with Assalamu alaikum, then I also started with Assalamu alaikum. So he acted everything out. Yeah.
Hmm.
وأجزتهم بها إجازة خاصة, and I specifically gave them a specific ijaza, like everything that I have narrated, I've given you ijaza for that. وعلى رأسهم الزميل الشيخ محمد إبراهيم الختني ثم المدني. Similarly, he says that this is the bit that I wanted you to look at. كما أجزتهم بجميع مروياتي ومؤلفاتي. Similarly, I gave them ijaza to narrate from me every one of my narrations and every one of my books, even though they haven't studied it with me. Right? Point
Wow.
number one. Point number one, he gave them ijaza of the
خاص.
musalsalat of Ibn Tayyib,
Oh.
which he called al-Ujala with his isnad. They studied that with him, and he gave them
Mm.
ijaza khas. But then he gave them an ijaza am, which is that now give you ijaza to study everything from me, to narrate everything from me, even those things that you have not studied from me, right?
Right.
Then he goes on one step forward and says, بل قد أجزت بجميع ذلك أهل عصري ووقتي والله أسأل أن ينفع بها إنه سميع مجيب. Nay, I have given permission to every single person in my time and in my era to narrate from me ijazatan, whatever that I have narrated and whatever I have written.
Wow.
Right. So the reason why I've mentioned this is because this is interesting. Imam Ibn Hajar will comment on this. I mean, he won't comment on this book because Sheikh, you know,
Right.
Yasin al-Fadani was during the World War II. But this way of doing ijaza, Imam Ibn Hajar will he will comment on that. But I thought that was like very, very interesting. And one of the most interesting things is the thick descriptions. The thick descriptions that you get which kind of puts, do you understand what thick description is? Thick description is the contextual information that you get, which puts the kind of the flesh on the bare bones of the hadith. So this, where
Interesting.
they're talking about their own personal kind of experiences about particular thing, gives then a flesh to the concept of musalsalat, but also a flesh to the concept of ijaza. And you won't forget this anymore because there's a story attached to this. Do you understand? And
Right.
so by reading the books of Tariq and history, you get a lot of these things. So look out for these things because stories, in a way, it consolidates the masail in your mind. Yeah.
Right.
That's
Very
why if you
interesting.
look at the best orators and the people who have written the best books on interpersonal relationship. I mean, like for example, what's the American guy? Um, his name. Uh, what's the very famous American orator? He's written how to influence people. Uh,
Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie. I mean, his book, if you study his book, all it is just basically stories and stories and stories and stories,
Yeah,
and then he's
yeah,
commenting on the stories, right?
that's
If you
true.
read Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, right? He's a fantastic writer, whatever if he's an atheist or not, but he's a fantastic communicator. It's the way that he's so convincing because of the narrative, the ustura, the narration that it's not theory. It's basically he is uh, um, kind of using what we call acoustic learning. Acoustic learning is using storytelling as a way of getting the theory across. It's a style. Yep.
Interesting.
Okay. Anyway, it's a literary style. And I kind of tend to use that in my writing as well. I tend to use like anecdotes and things like that. Okay, let's go back to Imam Ibn Hajar Asqalani. Right, any questions? Is Hussein, are you there?
Yes, Mara, I have no
Okay,
questions.
okay. Now we go on to the Siyagul Ada, right? We go on to the terminologies that the ulama used. And remember, terminologies, there are two terminologies because there are two people. In an isnad, there are two people. At the minimum, two people doing two things. One is transmitting information, and the other one is receiving information. A microphone and a loudspeaker, right? So one is transmitting information, a transmitter, and one is a receiver. Yeah, does that make
Hmm.
sense? So
Yes.
the transmitter is the teacher, the muhaddith, and he is called and so from his point of view it's called al-ada. Yeah, al-ada, because he's ada basically means to pass on, so he is
Hmm.
passing on, transmitting. From the point of view of the student, both of them are rawis because they are narrators, okay, but the student is receiving. Sometimes we basically say we call it tahammul. Tahammul from the word haml, which means to take on a burden. So this person is receiving this information. He's receiving this information, so physically he has burdened himself to preserve that information, either in his memory or in writing. So that's why it's called tahammul, that he has received that information, he has burdened himself. Yeah, he has tolerated. So tahammul, another word for tahammul is tolerate, but here it means to burden oneself. But
Hmm.
sometimes it's called sama', listening or audition. Yeah, sometimes it's called sama'. So you basically say siyagul adai wa tahammul. Siyagul adai wa tahammul or siyagul adai wa sama'. Right? Siyag basically means words or terminologies, terminologies of transmitting, but also
Hmm.
terminologies of reception as well. Yeah. So I mean, it works both ways. وصيغ الأداء المشار إليه على ثمانية مراتب. Um, and the words of transmission which has been indicated to us. So where does it say? Uh, the things that have been indicated to us previously, there are of 8 different categories. Maratib basically means that there's a hierarchy of of these terminologies. Some are stronger and others are less stronger. Al-ula or al-awla or al-ula. The first ones are sami'tu wa haddathani. Sami'tu wa haddathani. I heard wa haddathani. He has narrated to me, or he has narrated to me. Then comes summa akhbarani wa qara'tu alayhi. And then he has informed me and I read unto him, or I read to him. وهي المرتبة الثانية. This is the second degree. Then ثم قرئ عليه وأنا أسمع. And then قرئ عليه, it was read to him وأنا أسمع, whilst I was listening. It was read to him whilst I was listening. So I was in the class studying, but I was not the one who was reading, I was listening. Yeah. وهي الثالثة, this is the third. ثم أنبأني, and then he informed me. وهي الرابعة. ثم ناولني, and then he bestowed to me, or he gave to me. This is the fifth. ثم شافهني أي بالإجازة. وهي السادسة, and then he verbally gave me permission. This is the sixth. ثم كتب إلي أي بالإجازة. Then he wrote, he written to me the permission, or he wrote to me the permission. This is the seventh. ثم عن ونحوها, and then عن and others such as أن, those words من الصيغ المحتملة للسماع والإجازة ولعدم السماع أيضا, those words which also have the capacity to denote audition and permission, but also non-listening. So an can mean that I heard, or it can mean that it's from giving me an ijaza, or it basically can be a way of hiding tadlis. Yeah. وهذا مثل قال وذكر وروى. Yeah. قال ذكر وروى, etc., etc. Yeah. So these are the 8 maratib of صيغ الأداء والتحمل. واللفظان الأولان من صيغ الأداء وهما سمعت وحدثني. Yeah. سمعت وحدثني صالحان لمن سمع وحده من لفظ الشيخ. سمعت and حدثني, both of them are good to use, صالحان, or capable of using for whoever سمع وحده من لفظ الشيخ, who alone listens to the sheikh. So if you say حدثني محمد ibn al-Muthanna, Imam Bukhari says حدثني Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna, or let's say Imam Muslim says حدثني Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna, then it basically means that he alone heard this at that moment with Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna. There was nobody else in the class.
Mhm.
وتخصيص التحديث بما سمع من لفظ الشيخ هو شائع بين أهل الحديث اصطلاحا. And to specify tahdith as حدثني and حدثنا to mean that which has been heard from the words of the sheikh. هو شائع بين أهل الحديث اصطلاحا. It is a prominent terminology amongst the أهل الحديث. ولا فرق بين التحديث والإخبار من حيث اللغة. And there is no difference between tahdith and ikhbar from the point of view of lugha. حدثني and أخبرني in the dictionary, it means the same thing. But to make a technical distinction between them is something which the ulama of hadith do. Okay? But from the point of lugha, there is no distinction between them. Does that make sense? And
Yes.
وفي ادعاء الفرق بينهما takallufun shadidun, and to claim that there is a inherent difference between them is basically stretching it too far, right? There is no inherent difference between حدثني and أخبرني. لكن لما تقرر الاستلاح, however, when the istilah, the terminology, has become fixed and consolidated in the minds of people, صار ذلك حقيقة عرفية. This has become a normal or customary reality. Or this has become a norm. Yeah, it
mhm,
has become a normative. That will be حقيقة عرفية. It has become normative. فتقدم على الحقيقة اللغوية. It is to be privileged and put forward over the literal linguistic reality. And this is normally the case, that when you have something where there is something haqiqa lughawi, and there is something which is haqiqa urfi, the haqiqa urfi is always given preference. Yeah. For example, when a
mhm,
person says to his wife, "Talaqtuki," I have given you, I have given you divorce. طلقتك واحدا, I have given you one divorce. This automatically confers upon her one divorce. Now the question is, طلقتك is فعل ماضي, and this is a khabar. A jumla khabariya has got the potential of when the speaker says something and then he finishes his kalam, the listener can basically say you're either lying or you're either speaking the truth. So she can basically say no, you're lying, because it's an ikhbar. Yeah. But and also, um, when did that talaq happen? When did he give the talaq? He's just telling her about it now, but a talaq has not happened. In something to you are talking about something, then the haqiqat and that thing must have happened in the past. But here, this is the first time he's talking to her about talaq. So the answer to that is, the Arabs use فعل ماضي جملة خبرية talaq to express talaq immediately. And this is their haqiqa urfiya. And this haqiqa urfiya is, it trumps the haqiqa lughawiya. Does that make sense?
mhm,
Saying that, Sheikh Ahmed Shakir rahmatullahi alayhi has a very interesting book on talaq, very interesting study. He basically says that no talaq in the Arabic language can be established using jumla khabariya. That has its ramifications and implications, fiqhi implications. We don't need to go into that. Okay. The point I was making is that this is haqiqa urfiya and haqiqa lughwiya. Haqiqa urfiya is to be privileged. مع then Imam Ibn Hajar says, but despite that, despite the fact that it has become normal, it's become normative to distinguish between the tahdith and ikhbar, this is not a ubiquitous practice in the Muslim world. مع أن هذا الاصطلاح إنما شاع عند المشارقة ومن تبعهم. But that this istilah of distinguishing between the distinguishing between the tahdith, haddathani means that the teacher read to me, and akhbarani means that I read to the teacher. This is something which has become quite famous according to the Eastern in the Eastern Muslim world. وأما غالب المغاربة, and remember this is Imam Ibn Hajar is living, and all of these scholars have been living in the time when Andalus was a part, and the Western world, this is talking about Morocco and Tunis and Ifriqiya and other places they were conquered. وأما المغاربة فلم يستعملوا هذا الاصطلاح. As for the Maghariba, they did not distinguish between these two. بل الإخبار والتحذير عندهم بمعنى واحد. Rather, إخبار and تحديث according to them means the same thing. So they don't distinguish between حدثنا and أخبرنا. This is the opinion of the Hanafis, that they don't actually distinguish between حدثنا أخبرنا. Imam al-Tahawi rahmatullahi alayhi has written an entire book on the, or risala on this topic. This also is the opinion of Imam al-Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi. That's why, remember when I said, imagine Imam Bukhari narrating from saying حدثني Muhammad ibn Musanna, then I changed it to Muslim, right? Because Imam Bukhari does not distinguish between haddathana wa akhbarana. Imam Muslim does. Imam Muslim it makes a distinction between haddathana wa akhbarana, but Imam al-Bukhari does not make a distinction between haddathana. He says there is no dalil between distinction between haddathana and akhbarana, and he has a bab on this, where he basically in the Sahih al-Bukhari he says باب قول المحدث حدثنا وأخبرنا وأنبأنا. It says حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال حدثنا إسماعيل بن جعفر عن عبد الله بن دينار عن ابن عمر قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن من الشجر شجرة لا يسقط ورقها وإنها مثل المسلم فحدثوني ما هي. فوقع الناس في شجر البوادي. قال عبد الله ووقع في نفسي أنها النخلة فاستحييت ثم قالوا حدثنا ما هي يا رسول الله قال هي النخلة. So this is the very famous hadith where the Prophet ﷺ was saying that there is a tree which is similar to the human being. What is that? And Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar said that I knew the answer, but I didn't mention the answer because I was a bit shy. And then the Prophet ﷺ told them that it was the date palm. So here the mawdi'ul kind of ihtijaj is أنها مثل المسلم فحدثوني ما هي. The Prophet ﷺ says حدثوني أي فأخبروني, because فحدثوني here cannot mean the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is basically reading to them. Here he's basically telling them, you tell me, so you do ikhbar of me. And here ثم قالوا حدثنا ما هي, that Ya Rasulullah, you tell us. And now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling them. So both tahdith and ikhbar is here. Yeah, the teacher asking the students to tell him, and the students telling the teacher to tell him, tell them. So both words. So this is why Imam Bukhari basically does not distinguish between hadithuni, haddathana, and akhbarana. It means the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
فإن جمع الراوي أي بصيغة الجمع في الصيغة الأولى كأن يقول حدثنا فلان أو سمعنا فلان يقول فهو دليل على أنه سمع منه. So if the first two, which is حدثني and سمعت, if they are done in the plural, such as حدثنا and سمعنا, then they say that this is دليل على أنه سمع منه مع غيره, that they heard this أنه سمع منه, they heard this from the teacher with other students present in the class. So there were more than other one student in the class. وقد تكون النون للعظمة لكن بقلة. But however, it can also be that the سمعنا is a royal plural. Somebody is using it as a royal plural rather than giving the indication, especially the ones who do not bother for these terminologies, right? They won't kind of distinguish between haddathani and haddathana, so they might be using it as a royal plural. But the ones who are more meticulous, like Imam Muslim and others, then they will be quite meticulous on that. Lakin biqillah, however, this is seldom used as the royal plural. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes.
وأولها أي المراتب, and the first martaba is أصرحها, is the clearest, أي أصرح صيغ الأداء في سماع قائلها. It is the clearest word of transmission denoting the the audition of the person who is saying that. So this is the student, the listening of the person who is mentioning that, i.e., the student. When Imam Bukhari says, حدثني حدثني Muhammad ibn al-Musanna. Okay, let's not use Imam Bukhari because he. Oh, yeah, we can use him when he says Sami'tu Abdullah ibn Maslama al-Qa'nabi. So that is the clearest expression from al-Bukhari, rahmatullahi alayh, that he has heard from his teacher, Muhammad ibn Maslama al-Qa'nabi. That's why he's saying, أصرح سياغ الأداء في سماع قائلها. This is the clearest word used to denote that the person who's saying this has actually heard it. There is no sha'iba, there is no ambiguity there. So he's talking about both of them. حدثني and سمعت, right? لأنها لا تحتمل الواسطة, because there is no ambiguity, there's no kind of second any intermediaries here, right? An intermediary might be that the student is reading back to the teacher, and the teacher might say something, this is direct, there is no ambiguity, there is no intermediary. However, لكن حدثني قد تطلق في الإجازة تدليسا. Yeah. However, and this is where he is distinguishing, separating حدثني from سمعت. He says, however, sometimes the word حدثني is used to mean ijaza by a person who is doing tadlis. So a person who is doing tadlis might basically use the word حدثني to mean ajazani, but he's actually doing tadlis. But a mudallis is not allowed to use the word sami'tu, because that is an outright lie. Still, there is a scintilla of doubt in haddathani, right? It can be used as ijaza. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Why could حدثني be used as ijaza?
Because sometimes you say they use it. Sometimes you can use it like haddathani in the sense that ajazani. They sometimes use it like that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So وأولها أي المراتب, the first of the maratib. So remember, أولها is not the first of the words. So it's not only talking about سمعت, it's talking about the maratib, which is حدثني and سمعت. The أولها is أصرحها, it is the clearest. وأرفعها مقدارا ما يقع في الإملاء, and it is the highest form of surety when it is وأرفعه مقدارا ما يقع في الإمران, and it is the most highest standard. أرفعه مقدارا, it is the most highest standard when that happens in dictation, meaning that if Imam Bukhari wrote down حدثني محمد بن المثنى or سمعت محمد بن المثنى, you've got clear expressions of audition, right? Secondly, now this is written down. It can never be rubbed off again. It's there for history to see. So when that siyagul ada is then written down, then that bumps up its status. أرفعه مقدارا more. That's what it's saying. One is just to pass verbally, but to say سمعت محمد المثنى and write it down, and then that gets passed on, that's أرفعه مقدارا. That's of a higher status. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
لما فيها من التثبت والتحفظ, because by writing it down there is more tathabbut, there's no establishing, and there's more preservation there, as opposed to just passing it on through memory. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. العلم صيد وكتابته قيد. Knowledge is a game, right? Hunting game. And writing it down is to capture it. Yeah, that's what he's saying. والثالث وهو أخبرني, والرابع وهو قرأت لمن قرأ بنفسه على الشيخ. So the second martaba is the third and the fourth istilaha, and that is أخبرني and قرأت, for the person who reads to the teacher. This is called قراءة الشيخ, but also قراءة على الشيخ, not قراءة الشيخ. قراءة على الشيخ, right? But also it is known as al-ardu ala sheikh, to present to the sheikh. Yeah. لمن قرأ بنفسه على الشيخ, for the person who alone reads to the sheikh. فإن جمع, if he makes it into plural, كأن يقول أخبرنا أو قرأنا عليه, by saying أخبرنا and قرأنا عليه, then it's basically like that you are reading with other people in class. Yeah, reading with other people in class, but somebody else is reading, you happen to be there. فهو كالخامس, it's like the fifth one. What did he say in the fifth one? قرئ وأنا أسمع. So he's separated. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So he's modeled up the maratibs and the words itself. Yeah. So he says فهو كالخامس, by خامس is وهو قرئ عليه وأنا أسمع. And so what is the fifth one? It has been read to him whilst I was listening. وعرف من هذا, it is known, it is understood from this, أن التعبير بقرأت لمن قرأ خير من التعبير بالإخبار لأنه أفصح بصورة الحال. That to express with the word قرأت for the person who has read to the teacher is خير من التعبير, is best, is a better expression than using إخبار. لأنه, because قرأت is clearer about the context. قرأت is بصورة الحال, it's more clear about the context. So here he's made the distinction, the way that سمعت and حدث, in سمعت and حدثني, both of them are of the same martaba, but within that martaba, that hierarchy, سمعت has a degree over حدثني. So similarly here we got أخبرني and قرأت, or أخبرنا and قرأنا. He says that in the grand scheme of things, qara'tu has a degree over akhbarani because it's more clear. The context is more clear. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So now there is a difference of opinion amongst the ulama as to which one is better. Is sama' better or is qira' better? Sama' qira'at al-shaykh better or qira'at ala al-shaykh better? Now,
Mm.
obviously, Imam Ibn Hajar Asqalani rahmatullahi alayhi used martabatul ula sama', so according to him, sama' is better, and this is why he also wrote a book called this is the book. Taking delights from 40 distinguished hadiths received through audition. الإمتاع بالأربعين المتباينة السماع. Taking delight from 40 distinguished hadiths received through audition. So here So this is the book that I was talking to you about, uh, Omar, the one that I
Mm.
edited and wrote a sharh on. I just want to show you about Sama. Okay, there we go. So the Imta is a fine yet simple example of Imam Ibn Hajar's finesse in Hadith. Imam Ibn Hajar did not make the topics of the Hadith his main focus, but the Isnad. This is why when one reads the Imta, one will not get a feel for the logical arrangements of the topic. They are haphazard and range from fiqh to history. The brilliance of Imam Ibn Hajar. So this is me writing. The brilliance of Imam Ibn Hajar lies in his arrangements of the Isnad. Firstly, the collection is a composition of 45 hadiths the author heard directly from his teachers. This is the first important value of this book, which is also expressed in its title. There's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars of hadith regarding the best mode of receiving hadith from one's teacher. Some are of the opinion that it is to present one's material to the sheikh by reading it to him, qiraat al sheikh. This is expressed by some scholars using the phrase qara'tu ala, or more commonly akhbarana. Imam Malik was of the opinion that if the student is confident with his material and competent to relay it back to the teacher without making major mistakes, then it is better to present it to the teacher. However, the majority of the scholars are of the opinion that listening to the teacher recite the hadith is the superior mode of reception. This is expressed using the phrases sami'tu, or more famously by some as haddathana. However, the early scholars such as Abu Hanifa, At-Tahawi, Al-Bukhari did not make any semantical distinctions between the terms haddathana and akhbarana. Ibn Hajar seems to be following the opinion that audition is superior to presentation, hence the title of the book. Nevertheless,
Mm.
there is more than one example in the collection where Ibn Hajar reads to his Sheikh 5, 9, 17, 21, 29, or some other reads while Ibn Hajar is listening in the gathering. Qira'atan alayhi wa ana asma, hadith number 15. So I say it was the practice of our teacher. So this is me, I'm talking. It was the practice of our teacher, Sheikh Hashim Patel, may Allah give him long life, professor of Hadith at Darul Bari, to recite the text of Sunan Abu Dawood while all the students listened to him. His argument was that it is more accurate and blessed practice for the teacher to recite the text than the student to recite to him. The problem with that is that the students might fall asleep because the teacher is reading. This was the opposite to the practice of our other shuyukh of hadith who made the students recite the text to them. Obviously, one can appreciate the pedagogical value in their approach. So, most teachers, so I mean, like for example, Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, it is known that Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi once fell asleep while the students were reciting to him. But even in his sleep, he says, Malik qad na'isa, even in his sleep, like in his slumber. Obviously, he wasn't when the student make mistake, he corrected them. Allama Abdul Hayy Laknabi rahmatullahi alayh, he says that I haven't found anybody to multitask. And I don't take hadiths from anybody who multitasks at the same time. They need to give the full attention to hadith. Except for one of my uncles, who's a greengrocers, he says that he is so great and his memory is so great and he's so astute that I would be reading hadith to him and he will be selling his vegetables and dealing with customers, but when I make a mistake immediately, there's not a single mistake that I made and that he's not corrected me on this. So this is
MashaAllah.
Allama Abdul Hayy Laknawi. He writes this in his sharh of Sharif Jurjani's book. I forgot the name of the book now. I have it here. Um, Similarly, another point that is important. So have you ever seen my isnad?
No.
Hmm, where's my isnad gone? Let's have a look. This is a isnad from my brother, his isnad. إجازة خاصة في موطأ إمام مالك. فإن الأخ الفاضل قد سمع علي الحديث المسلسل بالأولوية ومطى الإمام مالك برواية يحيى وكان ذلك. So there's contextual information. Sheikh Muhammad Daniel. But I wanted to show you my isnad because there's something specific there. Uh, okay. Right. So this is my isnad to Imam Tirmizi. This is at the end of my PhD thesis. Here I basically say, I studied the Sunan of Abu Isa at Tirmizi with my teacher, the great Hadith scholar and Faqih Mufti Shabir Patel, starting on 21 Shawwal, 1420, corresponding to 19 January 2000, and finishing in the month of Rajab, corresponding to 21 October 2000 at Darul Ulum al Arabiya al Islamiyya Bari. Amin, Suhaib, and his son Muhammad recited the book to him, whilst I heard it with the rest of the student. So, قرأ أمين وصهيب وابنه محمد عليه وأنا أسمع. This is what I was trying to get at. Yeah?
Mm.
Yeah. So I didn't read his son and Amin, Mufti Amin and Mawlana Suhaib read, whilst I heard with the rest of the students. I read the entire Sahih al-Bukhari to Mawlana Yusuf Mutala, but not the Tirmidhi. So there are 24 people between me and Imam Tirmidhi, rahmatullahi alayhi. Sometimes, so here we have an example of Sahih al-Bukhari ما جاء في العلم وقوله تعالى وقل ربي. So this is an example of قراءة على الشيخ. Okay, so I was reading Fathul Bari today, and I came across something, and because I knew what I will be teaching today, so I kind of snapshotted it. I wanted to show you something. This is a hadith in Bab ad-Dawabi Albani al-Ibil in Kitab al-Tib, using camel milk for medication. He basically with the isnad, Imam Ibn Hajar says, عن سلام ibn Miskin قال حدث ثابت حدث ثابت الحسن وأصحابه. Yeah. حدثنا ثابت والبناني وقع للإسماعيلي من رواية باسم عن سلام بن مسكين قال حدث ثابت الحسن وأصحابه وأنا شاهد معهم. So he's basically saying Salam ibn Miskin is saying Sabit al-Bunani or al-Bannani, there's a debate and there was a Twitter spot quite a few years ago with Jonathan Brown and others on whether this is Sabit al-Bunani or Sabit al-Bannani. Anyway, Sabit al-Bunani, that he narrated this hadith to Hassan and his classmates, and I happened to be there with them. Salam ibn Miskin basically says that my intention wasn't to study. I wasn't there to study, but I just happened to be there with them at that time. I was just visiting them. I happened to be there. Imam Ibn Hajar says, فيؤخذ من ذلك أنه لا يشترط في قول الراوي حدثنا فلان أن يكون فلان قد قصد إليه بالتحديث بل إن سمع منه اتفاقا جاز أن يقول حدثنا فلان. Yeah, Imam. So this is quite interesting. I mean, I didn't actively go out to find this, but I found this today when I was looking for something else, and I thought I'll capture this moment so that I can mention it to you guys today. So he says, Imam Ibn Hajar says that أنه لا يشترط في قول الراوي حدثنا. It's not a condition in the when the hadith says Rawi says حدثنا فلان that this fulan actually specifically went intended to study there. But he can also he could have heard it ittifaqan, coincidentally, and then he can basically go on to say حدثنا فلان. Does that make sense? Which is
makes sense. That's very interesting.
There's something else I captured. Okay, that's fine. Enough of this capturing. Let's get back to the text. Right. So we've done the whole discussion of قراءة على الشيخ and قرأت, and all of that. Why do you think somebody will read to the Sheikh? قراءة العرض المحدث or العرض للشيخ. Why do you think somebody would do that?
I mean, do they read to so that the sheikh can make sure they did not make a mistake and correct them?
In dictation, yeah.
Great.
And especially in the, remember in the early period, the isnad, the function of the isnad was to ascertain that the hadith has been correctly received and transmitted and documented.
Right.
Yeah. Once collectors come about like Bukhari and Muslim and Tirmidhi and Abu Dawud, really now uh, the the in a way the whole process of isnad is moot as far as establishing a hadith is concerned. Well, the hadith is established, right? It's written
Right.
down, it's collected in a book, so we don't need any more isnads after Bukhari. But the isnad had another function. Okay, there were always pious functions or pious motives, and
Mm-hmm.
that is, as I mentioned here in my thingy, in my PhD thesis, someone with an isnad is like a link in the chain. Whenever he moves on any matter, the whole chain up to our master, the messenger, moves with him. This is Abdul Wahab al-Sha'rani says. So there is always this pious element that you want to be a part of that silsila, a part of that tasalsul of pious
Right.
people. Right, that pious motive has always been there, but I'm talking about functions here, like actual practical function. What would be the practical function after the books have come about? So the practical after the books have come about is that um, the the isnad, and especially the ard ala al-muhaddith, ensures that the book has been properly dictated and written down and transmitted from the muhaddith. Remember, there weren't publications and there weren't printing presses, so these books had to be transmitted, right? And like had to be verbally, kind of read out. And in big majlises, very very big majlises, you had a special people called mufid. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
like when our microphone system breaks down, what happens? And the Jamaat is big and we're praying, somebody volunteers to become the mukabbir, right? To
Right.
become the
Right.
loudspeaker. So similarly, there were scholars who were known as mufid. So there's a Shia terminology for mufid. This is something else. But in the Sunni terminology, mufid, and they were like the mukabbir. So they used to listen to the hadith, and obviously there were scholars as well. You can't be a mukabbir without a mufid without being a
Right.
scholar, and they used to pass that on. Students used to write down. Now, remember, there was no such thing as printing press, so nobody's nuskha or nobody's copy. When you personal copies, these things started as personal copy. Nobody said, "Oh, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to publish it." It was personal notes. Nobody's personal note. Nobody had the ijaza to go and transmit this entire book from this teacher without the teacher giving ijaza and authorizing this book. And the
Interesting.
way that the teacher would authorize this book is that the student had to read the entire manuscript or enter what they wrote from the teacher, the entire manuscript back to the teacher, and the teacher will basically say, "Yes, this is a accurate rendition of what I basically dictated to you."
So-
He might basically say, "Make a change here or make a change," then he'll give ijaza. Then the ijaza then ensures that the book has been transmitted rather than individual hadith has been transmitted. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
And
It
then,
makes sense. I mean, I guess practically speaking, so was it like let's say Sahih al-Bukhari was published, and then now you're at the students of Bukhari. So was it that the teacher would open up his book that maybe he wrote down from his teacher, whose teacher's teacher was Imam Bukhari, and then be reading from the book, and then eventually, if the student wanted to read from the book, would they take the teacher's book maybe because the teacher
yeah, yeah,
eventually is going to pass away,
Yeah.
And so people are going to ask, like, where's this book for? Because you also have kind of the evidence
Okay,
problem of, right,
one of the things that you have to understand is, when we want to put something on a blog, write something on a blog, how do we phrase it?
on a blog.
Yeah. How
I don't know,
what's the terminology that we use to write something on a blog?
blogging or something,
Blogging
right?
or publishing on a blog.
Publishing, right, right,
Yeah, we
right.
use the word publishing. Uh,
Publishing, right,
yeah. So what is publishing? Publishing or publication is to make one's work public.
right,
That's all it is, right?
right,
Any work that enters in the public domain means that you have published that work.
right,
The media does not matter. The
right,
book is only one medium out of a number of media for
right,
publication. The internet is a media for publication.
right.
But in the early periods, reading out a book in front of a jama'ah or reading out your work in front of a jama'ah is publishing that work.
Is
That is a
publishing.
publication. And this is why Mufti Abu Lays and others have got it completely wrong when they are looking for material, or the first that we have is al-Yunini's kind of manuscript of Sahih Bukhari, and Yunini was a student of a student of a student. They got it completely wrong because they're thinking of modern printing press. Nobody's talking about modern printing publication. Is not Modern printing press was not the beginning of publication. Publication basically is nothing more than to make something public, and then people will write it down. Once those people
Interesting.
write it down, then they will get an ijaza for that, and either the teacher then will give that their kind of notebook with their ijaza on it. They will give it to the student, right? This is called munawala, or the
Okay.
student will write, dictate. The student teacher will dictate, and the student will write it down and get their copy signed, and that is called ijaza. So it's different variations of that, right? And
Right.
my very good friend and brother Mufti Muntasir Zaman, he's written his very brilliant book on the transmissions and integrity of Sahih Bukhari. You should read it, both of you. It's very good, and it's a response to all of those people who are raising questions on the Sahih Bukhari. But then, after the printing press came, the Gutenberg press came, and the printing
Right.
press came, in a way, even the ijaza system, in a way, has become moot, because you don't need an ijaza no longer to kind of ascertain that this book has been transmitted properly. What you need is a
Right.
critical edition, a muhaqqiq. You have Sheikh Mustafa Di Bugha, or somebody else, Sheikh Bashar Awad, or Sheikh Shuaib Al Arnaut, or somebody else doing a very good job of comparing the manuscripts and then publishing them, and then that then becomes like that you can ascertain that this is a true copy of the original manuscripts that they have used. So no longer then you need ijaza. Functionally, I'm talking functionally. You need ijaza for other stuff, like for example, pious motives. But then the ijaza always had. So this is not. It's not like or the function of this isnad stopped here, and then this function came, and then this function. No, it's parallel. But I'm just trying to historicize the isnad. There's another function of the isnad, and that function is that the isnad also ensured the correct meaning, correct understanding, and also
Right.
correct talaffuz, right?
Right.
Because
Right. That's also very key.
or the correct vocalization.
Right.
And this is why a lot of people basically charge Sheikh Nasiruddin al-Albani that he's Suhufi. He's just taken something from a book, and he's just reading it, and that's why he's making a
Right.
mistake, because he doesn't have the human kind of transmission. And sometimes the human transmission is very important, because you don't know if the hadith is saying halaqa, or you don't know if it says hilqa. You don't know if it says
Right.
takhattum or if it says tahajjum. Does that make sense? So it's the,
Makes
you don't
sense.
know if it's nurun anna ara or is it nuraniyun ara. It's the teacher who will pass down that knowledge to you because they've got received that knowledge. So in that sense, it also preserves the understanding. So sometimes we have like Sheikh Nuhamim Kala writes about his grand teacher Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Shaghuri, that Abdurrahman al-Shaghuri, he gave ijaza of tasawwuf to one of his disciples, and then later on they were having, so now this disciple can now go and have his own murids. But then what happens is that Sheikh Shaghuri and this disciple, this murid, they were having a discussion about Ibn al-Arabi's and the understanding of Ibn Arabi's Wahdatul Wujud, and Sheikh Shaghuri found that the student's understanding and his understanding of Wahdatul Wujud is different, and they couldn't come to there was an impasse, and the student wouldn't agree with the teacher. So Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Shaghuri basically says, took the ijazah back from him and said, I'm sorry, but you can't represent me because this is not my teaching. So you
Right.
can't
Interesting.
represent my teaching and associate your name with me and then teach that stuff and say that it's coming from me. So he
Right.
took it. I took it back. So and then what you have is you have like kind of funky stuff that's happening. People do really, like I said, like the coin collectors. People do these really interesting things in order to, uh, you know. I mean, it's their shauq for hadith, isn't it? So then they go on and start doing other stuff. So, for example, this is a very beautiful book written by Imam Suyuti, Imam Suyuti, and the book is called Al-Fanid fi Halawat al-Asanid. So this is the
Mm.
talking about the beauty of the isnads. And if you want to look at some of the beauty of the isnads, I'll show you. It's quite interesting what he's doing. So they're only interested in the isnad. They're not really interested in the حديث في رواية نبينا صلى الله عليه وسلم عن إبراهيم الخليل. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم narrating from Ibrahim alayhi salam. Yeah,
Subhanallah.
check it. Then we have اجتمع فيه خمسة من الصحابة يروي بعضهم عن بعض. Right? Um, so we have here حدثنا ابن حيان قال حدث الشاذكني حدث سفيان بن عيينة عن الزهري عن سعيد بن المسيب عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن عاص عبد الله بن عمرو بن عاص عن عثمان بن عفان عن عمر بن الخطاب عن أبي بكر الصديق عن بلال رضي الله تعالى قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الموت كفارة لكل مسلم. One thing which is basically we want you to keep in mind for next week is when we do amba'ana. Amba'ana was a terminology that was used by the mutaqaddimun, but seldom. What reading through Imam Suyuti's this Al-Fanid, Imam Suyuti died in 9/11, we find that they're always using amba'ana quite a lot. So they're not using haddathana and akhbarana as much, but they're using amba'ana. So he says akhbarani Shaykhuna al-Imam Taqiyuddin Shumunni بقراءة عليه, who's also a teacher of Ibn Hajar. قال أنبأ عبد الله بن علي الكناني قال أنبأ علي بن أحمد العرضي أخبرتني زينب بنت مكي قال أنبأ حنبل بن عبد الله قال أنبأ أبو القاسم بن الحسين. So this is the interesting kind of phenomenon that the later scholars they're using imba, right? Another phenomenon which you might not have noticed, but I write about this in my PhD thesis, is that the closer that you go to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time, what happens is technical terminologies kind of die away, and all you get is an all the way through.
Yep.
Right? So you'll see حدثنا محمد بن حيان الأنصاري قال حدث الشاذلي قال حدث سفيان عن الزهري عن سعيد بن المسيب عن عبد الله بن عمرو عن عثمان عن عمر, and the reason why this is because these kind of terminologies of حدثنا أخبرنا أنبأنا, all of these things in this early period hasn't developed yet. It was still in use, but it wasn't developed enough for it to be used.
Right.
Yeah. So and that's why there is a whole discussion on an'ana, because we need to understand what an'ana is doing. Because in the early period we don't have that level of
Technical.
technical detail or technical
Right.
precision. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've
Sheikh,
done.
one really quick question, just
Yeah.
one very quick question. So I see in the hadith books sometimes it says like thana. Thana is haddathana. Is it
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
a
So this is just like, so
abbreviation?
it's just a abbreviation. So uh, uh, yeah, so thana is haddathana,
Right.
and if it's just na, then it's akhbarana. So it's a way of basically for them not to write haddathana, haddathana,
Very
haddathana.
interesting. I
Yeah.
was gonna ask you is what is thana in the list of the maratib because I see it so much, but that's good
Yeah,
to know
so
it's an
it's
abbreviation.
haddathana, and also the other thing that they don't mention is qala. So there's always حدثنا الشاذكوني قال حدثنا سفيان بن عيينة قال عن الزهري قال عن سعيد بن. They don't mention the قال.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Okay, so let's leave it at this. There are other terminologies coming. I think we had an interesting discussion today.
MashaAllah.
Let's stop the share. Do you have any questions, Hussein? Do you have any questions? You've been awfully quiet.
No questions. Sorry, just not feeling
Okay.
great today. So just listening.
لا بأس طهور إن شاء الله.
Inshallah.
Okay, take care. I will see you next week. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Salam.